Welcome back to Panda Audiobooks. We have reached the heart of the land of the ancients, and the air here is heavy with the scent of the Primordial Lotus. But for Jian Wushuang, there is no time to breathe. In our last episode, Wushuang and his father, Nantian, fought through the skyrending python to reach the sacred garden. Now, the healing process must begin, but it comes at a terrible price. Today, we stand as the ultimate shield. Chapters 266 through 270 cover the Lotus fusion. To save his father's life, Wushuang must stay by his side while the Lotus purifies Nantian's meridians. This process takes 48 hours. 48 hours where Nantian cannot move and Wushuang cannot leave a 10-foot circle. Sensing this vulnerability, the Divine Sovereign has sent the Assassin of the Void, a killer who doesn't exist in the physical realm. Wushuang must fight an invisible war, defending his father against an enemy he cannot see, while the calamity beasts of the garden decide if they want to help or feast. The ultimate test of protection begins now. Chapter 266 starts right away. Chapter 266. Questioning. It's quite easy to find an excuse. Ling Han said with a smile. In 3 days, Wilderness Sword Sect and Deluo Heaven Sect and many other old sects in northern region will hold a competition for disciples. It's held every year, and disciples of these sects under 30 years old are qualified. This year, the best genius of Wilderness Sword Sect is called Chen Feng, son of Wilderness Sword Sect Master. Oh! Jian Wushuang realized what Deluo Heaven Sect needed him to do. Wilderness Sword Sect Master is strong and steady, but his Achilles heel is his son. Once his son dies, he will go mad, said Ling Han. Jian Wushuang asked, so you want me to kill him in the competition? Yes, Ling Han nodded. It happened in the past that some disciples were killed during battles, they didn't mind too much. Therefore, if you kill Chen Feng accidentally, you will not be blamed. Don't worry about your identity. There are so many disciples in Deluo, it's normal for a genius appears. What we only worry about is Chen Feng's strength. Ling Han stopped, then he continued. Chen Feng has great talent and his cultivation of spiritual power has reached peak of the Yang Void realm. Only one in Deluo Heaven Sect could be a match for him, but he is incapable of killing him, that's why we sought help from alchemy school. I understand. Jian Wushuang nodded. Deluo Heaven Sect needed an excuse to deal with Wilderness Sword Sect. If Chen Feng was killed in the competition, Wilderness Sword Sect Master would go mad and do something crazy. Therefore, Deluo Heaven Sect would have a good excuse to fight back. Do you agree? Ling Han looked over at him. I have one condition, replied Jian Wushuang. What is it? Ling Han didn't turn a hair. On my way here, I was curious about a sword skill called Sword Realm which Junyi brandished when we fought with each other. I study sword principle, so I want to have a look, could I? Jian Wushuang said. Jian Wushuang was curious about it and at the same time he looked forward to it. Sword Realm? Ling Han raised his eyebrows. It is an extraordinary sword skill of high 3rd grade and even could be a match for a low 2nd grade, which is a high-level sword skill in Deluo Heaven Sect. In general, outsiders could not get it, but... In the next breath, Ling Han said, you're not an outsider strictly. If you promise to help us kill Chen Feng in the competition, what will a sword skill of 3rd grade be? Okay, no problem. Jian Wushuang agreed. Ling Han smiled, and then he asked in an intentional way, by the way, you look very young, how old are you? My age. 21 years old. Answered Jian Wushuang. He was over 20, certainly he could say he is 21 years old. 21? Ling Han frowned. How strong could he be at such a young age? May I know your cultivation of spiritual power level? Ling Han asked. Though Ling Han was the 9th elder of Deluo Heaven Sect, his cultivation was at half saint and did not reach the saint realm yet. Besides, Jian Wushuang was good at hiding his level because he cultivated heavenly creation skill. So he couldn't tell which level Jian Wushuang was at. Jian Wushuang didn't answer him, but his spiritual power spread after a quick action. As soon as his power was unleashed, Ling Han perceived it. Initial Yang Void realm? Ling Han frowned more. Chen Feng was at the peak of the Yang Void realm. Does Elder Ling Han think I am not strong enough? Jian Wushuang looked over at him with a smile. No, Ling Han shook his head, smiling. Since you are recommended by alchemy school, there must be a reason. Okay. Jian Wushuang smiled and didn't say more. Friend, let me take you to the place you shall live in. Ling Han brought Jian Wushuang to a courtyard. In the night there was a full moon. The main meeting hall of Deluo Heaven Sect was closed. Deluo Heaven Sect's master and many elders gathered here, among whom 4 were experts of the Saint Realm. Everything is ready and experts of the Saint Realm of Alchemy School will arrive in 2 days, waiting for the start. Deluo Heaven Sect's master, a handsome middle-aged man, said in a deep voice. Elders in the hall were all excited at hearing that. They had waited for this day for so long. Elder Ling Han, did the genius sent by Alchemy School arrive? The middle-aged man looked over at Ling Han. He has come, but, though Ling Han nodded, his expression was strange. What? The middle-aged man asked. The genius called Swordsman, he is only 21 years old. More importantly, his cultivation of spiritual power is at initial Yang Void Realm. Ling Han said. Initial Yang Void Realm? The middle-aged man's eyes turned cold. Most of the Deluo Heaven Sect elders presented were also dissatisfied with it. What the hell is Alchemy School is doing, sending one of initial Yang Void Realm? There are many of initial Yang Void Realm in Deluo Heaven Sect. Why would we seek for one more from them? Initial Yang Void Realm, no matter how strong he is, how could he kill an expert at the peak of the Yang Void Realm? Hearing their questioning, Ling Han frowned because he also doubted Jian Wushuang's strength. A powerhouse in initial Yang Void Realm, even if he is an exceptional genius, how strong could he be? While Chen Feng, not only was he in peak of the Yang Void Realm, but he was also a nurtured genius in Wilderness Sword Sect. We have prepared so much for this day, any failure is not allowed in the final push. The handsome middle-aged man said with a cold voice, Elder Ling Han, try to figure out his real strength. You can send some geniuses to test him, openly or secretly. Figure out whether he is really in defiance of the natural order. Otherwise, we have to make other plans as soon as possible. Yes. Ling Han nodded and left immediately. Chapter 267. Potential. Dim moonlight shone over the earth. Ling Han came to the courtyard where Jian Wushuang lived, followed by a noble and dignified young man. Listen, Yise, try your best to make that man battle with all his strength. You can invite him to fight with you. If he doesn't agree, you can force him to do so, but do not hurt him too badly, understand? Looking at the young man, Ling Han warned. The young man was called Yise, the strongest among the young generation in Deluo Heaven Sect. In the young generation of Deluo Heaven Sect, he was the only one who was capable of fighting with Chen Feng. I got it. Yise nodded slightly. As he was talking, he was ready to go to the courtyard. Wait a minute. Suddenly Ling Han shouted to stop him. What happened? Yise looked over at him. Ling Han didn't say anything, but his eyes had turned to the courtyard. They could see Jian Wushuang, wearing black, practicing swordsmanship alone. There was nothing special before, but when Ling Han saw Jian Wushuang practicing swordsmanship, his eyes narrowed by instinct. That is, the origin? Ling Han was shocked. As a powerhouse of half-saint level, he had comprehended the origin and he was familiar with it. He was not shocked that Jian Wushuang had comprehended the origin, but that while Jian Wushuang was practicing swordsmanship, the origin had inspired the force of the heaven and the earth. In the courtyard, Jian Wushuang was brandishing the sword freely. The sword light was sparkling under the moonlight. Those normal sword shadows seemed to shake the heaven and the earth. Each move inspired the source of heaven and earth. Motivating the heaven and the earth. This is potential. Ling Han's eyes were full of astonishment. It's weird. Seeing Jian Wushuang practicing swordsmanship, Yise also narrowed his eyes. Yise, go to the hall immediately. Bring the sect master and elders here. Ling Han told him. What? Yise was shocked. Hurry. Ling Han spoke seriously. Yes. Yise left. Soon Deluo Heaven Sect's master and elders came to Ling Han. When they arrived, they were attracted by what was happening in the courtyard. This is motivating the source of heaven and earth. Potential, the first level of source enlightenment. How old is he? How could he reach such a level of source enlightenment? The sect master and elders were all shocked. There were 3 levels of source enlightenment. The first one was potential. Even though it was the first level, it was hard to reach. It would take a normal expert of the saint realm dozens of years to reach it. If one reached it, he would be recognized as a powerhouse in the saint realm. But now, they saw a young man, who was about 20 years old, and his cultivation of spiritual power was in the initial young void realm, who had reached such a level of source enlightenment. Ling Han, he is the genius invited by alchemy school? An elder asked directly. Yes, he is. Ling Han nodded seriously. He is just 21 years old. How could he reach such a level of source enlightenment? The elder sighed with emotion. Among these people, sect master and 2 elders, who were in divine transcendence, both the 2 elders had not reached the potential level of source enlightenment. That is to say, Jian Wushuang's level in source enlightenment was higher than them both. While I'm just getting Yi Se to sound out his real strength, I saw that. Therefore, I let him bring you here. Ling Han said. Well done. The sect master nodded. Even though his cultivation of spiritual power was an initial Yang Void Realm, he could fight with one in peak of the Yang Void Realm with his source enlightenment. Maybe he has other cards. Perhaps he could really kill one at the peak of the Yang Void Realm. Hearing that, elders around him all agreed. Ha ha, I thought he was a normal person of initial Yang Void Realm. It turns out that I am wrong. Thinking about this carefully, it's beneficial for the alchemy school to wipe out Wilderness Sword Sect. How could they send a normal initial Yang Void Realm here? Though his cultivation of spiritual power is a little bit low, it's hard to judge his real strength. After seeing Jian Wushuang's performance in source enlightenment, those elders who were not satisfied with Jian Wushuang's low cultivation of spiritual power changed their attitude. It was incredible for a 21-year-old youth to reach the potential level in source enlightenment. Compared with that, it was easier for one in initial realm of Yang Void Realm to kill one at peak of the Yang Void Realm. By the way, did the young man request for something when he promised to give us a helping hand? The sect master asked. Yes, he asked for the Sword Realm. Ling Han replied. Give it to him. The sect master said smilingly, give it to him now. The competition will start in 3 days. If he could comprehend the Sword Realm, his strength will improve and he would be much more capable of killing Chen Feng. Yes, master. Ling Han nodded. After taking the Sword Realm, he went to Jian Wushuang. In the courtyard, Jian Wushuang had stopped practicing. He stood there, closing his eyes. Potential. Lift the heavy as if it is light. Motivate the heaven and the earth. I was wondering how it motivated. Now I know it is the origin that motivates the source energy. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes with a smile. These days he was studying the first level of source enlightenment, potential. Just now, something flashed in his brain. It happened. People would be jealous if they knew how he got it. After all, so many powerhouses, including some experts of the Saint Realm, went to great pains but failed. However, Jian Wushuang reached it by random inspiration. Of course, this was because Jian Wushuang had great talent in meditation, but partly also because of his sword soul. Sword soul not only made it easier for him to comprehend sword essence, but also played an incomparable role in origin comprehension. Chapter 268. Let the games begin. I'll prove myself to be worthy of sword soul. The corners of Jian Wushuang's mouth raised. Originally during the destruction of the bloodline of Sword Ancestor and all of its extreme power, none of the ordinary disciples paid any mind to the mansion of Sword Marquis. However, when the awakening of a genius with Sword Soul appeared, they immediately sent someone to dispose of him. Sword Soul truly is extraordinary. Sword Soul not only allowed him to grasp sword essence faster than ordinary people, but he could also sense the origin at a similarly fast rate as well. It wasn't surprising then that when that mysterious man had been sent to seize his mother and father, he had used the Sword Soul's Jian Nantian to wrest them away. He's grasped the origin up to this level. However, my strength has also increased by no small amount. Jian Wushuang thought. Suddenly, as he raised his head, he saw a figure descending into the courtyard. Swordsman, my friend. Ling Han said with a smile. Elder Ling Han, what have you come at such an hour to find me for? Jian Wushuang glanced over. Just then, as he had been practicing his swordsmanship, He had faintly sensed that someone was around. Now he could see that this had been the case. Does my friend the swordsman not want my Deluo Heaven Sect's sword realm? I've come here just for this purpose. As he spoke, Ling Han took a tome out from the interspatial ring and handed it to Jian Wushuang. Sword realm? Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up, but then he laughed. I thought that the Deluo Heaven Sect would hand me this only after the task was completed. Ling Han laughed, but inwardly he felt embarrassed. Previously they indeed had planned to hand him the sword realm after Jian Wushuang had completed the task of beheading Chen Feng. However, just a moment ago they had seen Jian Wushuang's understanding of the origin, causing them to temporarily change their minds. My friend swordsman, there are still 3 days remaining. You can take this sword skill and study it well, perhaps it will have numerous benefits for you. I won't bother you any further today and take my leave. Ling Han left immediately after he was finished speaking. Jian Wushuang immediately began to flip through the tome. After some time, Jian Wushuang closed the tome. Sword realm, not bad, Jian Wushuang said with a grin. Sword realm truly was a rather unique sword skill. It would propel the sword essence into becoming a small-scale realm of sword essence, and would constantly attack and hinder the opposition. Even though it was quite difficult to accurately read an opponent, with this you could exert a tremendous influence over them. That time when Jian Wushuang had fallen into Junyi's realm of sword essence, it was as if he had fallen into a deep quagmire, and it had become significantly more difficult to move. Also, the sword realm had 3 types: sword fog, sword tide, and sea-like sword form. As Junyi had implemented the sword fog, it was only the first move of the sword realm. Grasping this first move was not difficult at all. However, the second move sword tide and third move sea-like sword form were not as simple. Once in the Deluo Heaven Sect there were quite a few people studying these sword skills, but the majority of them could only reach the level of sword fog. Very few could reach sword tide, and as for sea-like sword form, the Deluo Heaven Sect had never had any person who was studying the sword realm reach that stage. I'm afraid the reason that the Deluo Heaven Sect has given me this sword realm tonight is that they want me to grasp this move sword fog within these 3 days. After 3 days when I battle Chen Feng, he'll have grasped some higher level moves. Jian Wushuang sneered. He also guessed there existed some doubt amongst the people in the Deluo Heaven Sect in regards to his power, but he didn't care. He would handle this. After 3 days, he would kill Chen Feng, and with the matter settled he would leave. As for how the people in the Deluo Heaven Sect saw him, he couldn't care less. 3 days' time passed quickly. Every year all of the old sects in the northern region would hold the first meeting of the disciples, and it had begun. In the early morning as the sky glimmered with the first light of dawn, a few genius disciples from the young generation of the Deluo Heaven Sect as well as Jian Wushuang arrived at the giant martial arts practice field, Ling Han craning his neck to see all the way. The martial arts practice field was already packed with spectators who had come to see this coming together of so many experts. The geniuses from the Deluo Heaven Sect sat down in the seats at the top row of the martial arts practice field, but Ling Han had left for the moment. Jian Wushuang was also close behind as he sat down in the back row, his eyes slightly closed. The genius disciples from the Deluo Heaven Sect that were around would glance at him from time to time, odd expressions on their faces. Senior brother Yi Se, who is this? Is he also a disciple of our Deluo Heaven Sect? Why have I never seen him before? A disciple couldn't refrain from inquiring. Shut up, don't ask questions. Yi Se chided and said no more. As the Deluo Heaven Sect had been planning this matter, only the elders of the highest level were aware. Yi Se was the first person amongst the younger generation of disciples and the only person who was qualified to contend against the genius Chen Feng. He knew about this matter and knew all about Jian Wushuang's identity. As for the other geniuses, however, including Junyi, they knew nothing. Just then, a row of a dozen or so people slowly came out of the void and onto the martial arts practice field. When these people appeared, they immediately drew the attention of all the experts of all the sects in the martial arts practice field. These dozen or so people, they came from the Wilderness Sword Sect. Even though the Wilderness Sword Sect had declined much in recent years, they were still overlords in this northern region and were still number 1 of the top 8 sects. Even though the Deluo Heaven Sect's strength was sufficient to go up against the Wilderness Sword Sect, when faced with the might of their reputation, it started to feel like they were a bit inferior to them. Due to this, the Deluo Heaven sect always wanted to take the place of the Wilderness Sword sect. This group of people was headed by a baby-faced purple-haired man. He had a slender frame, and there seemed to be some arrogance in his appearance. After he had sat down and seen the geniuses from the Deluo Heaven sect, the corners of his mouth had perked up. "Yise, long time no see," the purple-haired man said with a smile, but as he raised his head, you could sense that he was looking down on them. "Chen Feng." Yise raised his head and glanced at the purple-haired man. "It has been a long time. It seems that the two of us have never fought either. In today's match, you must lose too terribly," Chen Feng said as if he was joking. Yise's eyes narrowed, and he didn't respond. Chen Feng also didn't press. Afterwards his gaze moved and concentrated on Jian Yi. Seeing Jian Yi, a look of surprise spread across Chen Feng's face. "Jian Yi, it's been a long time for the two of us as well. I heard that you were outside training, and in the course of your training you ran into a conflict with a middle-sized empire. What's wrong? Did you sustain any injuries? What middle-sized empire would dare disrespect you? Tell me, I'll send someone to take care of them and give them a taste of your wrath. It's just a misunderstanding between me and that middle-sized empire. There's no real conflict at all. I can only express my appreciation for your kind gesture." Jian Yi sat with an ice-cold expression, appearing utterly detached and indifferent. "Oh, so it's like this?" Chen Feng nodded, but then smiled. "Then you should be careful. If you run into any issues, let me know directly. If I run into any trouble, I have my own sect's senior brothers or elders. I won't cause you any trouble," Jian Yi said coldly. Hearing this, Chen Feng's face brightened like before and seemed full of delight, but there was a certain foreboding in his eyes. After he turned around, his face changed and became distorted. He cursed quietly, "Filthy bitch, sooner or later there will be a day where I'll make you kneel down in front of me and obey." Chapter 269, Chen Feng. His Chen Feng? Sitting in his chair, Jian Wushuang had also seen the purple-haired man. However, Chen Feng only had eyes for Yise and Jian Yi. He hadn't paid him any mind at all. The gathering would begin soon. The process for this gathering between the disciples of the various old sects was exceedingly simple. They would simply go out onto the martial arts practice field, and every sect's genius disciple could make contact with whomever they wished. Whoever you wanted to fight with, you would step in front of them and ask for a fight. For the most part, none of them would refuse. They quickly went out onto the martial arts practice field, and each match began amongst the disciples. In the beginning, Jian Wushuang watched with keen interest. He had to say, the theory and power of these old sect geniuses was not ordinary. Whether it was their cultivation of spiritual power or realization of various concepts, they were all significantly stronger than the geniuses of the 12 Northwestern dynasties. However, after watching 3 matches, he lost interest. The reason was simple: in all of the fights between the disciples, they pulled their punches. It was merely an ordinary battle in order to compare notes with one another. None of them were true life-or-death brawls. When he had been a part of the easternmost hunting in the beginning of the Qianzong dynasty, the selection battles were all life-or-death struggles from the start. For the sake of gaining the favor of the old sects, everyone used every last ounce of their strength in order to attempt to kill their opponent. A great number of experts perished. The cruelty of the easternmost hunting was extreme compared to this so-called gathering of disciples. In comparison to the easternmost hunting, even though the level of power of the disciples in this gathering between the old sects was quite high, the nature of the whole event was completely different. "Swordsman, my friend, what do you think of these sects' geniuses?" Ling Han glanced over. "They're all right," Jian Wushuang responded unenthusiastically. Ling Han raised his eyebrows and said no more. Half the day passed quickly. During this period of time, there were no less than a dozen of these matches where the old sect disciples took notes and learned from one another. However, despite the fact that there were so many confrontations, the most disastrous event was merely that one genius sustained an injury. In all of the other matches, they pulled their punches and didn't overdo it. Every sect's disciple has come out. All that's left is our Deluo Heaven sect and the Wilderness Sword sect. Ling Han's eyes narrowed. "Yise, it's almost time." Ling Han looked at Yise, who immediately nodded his head in understanding and then stood up. As he got up, nearly all eyes in the entire martial arts practice field were on him. Yi says, coming out to the arena. Ha ha, finally the climax of this gathering of disciples has arrived. We've been here all day, finally there's something worth seeing. All of the sect experts in the arena sighed. After Yi Se stood up, he quickly walked into the center of the martial arts practice field and directed his gaze towards the Wilderness Sword sect. Chen Feng, come out. Out of all of the young generation disciples in all of the sects of the northern region, only you can battle with me. Yi Se's voice carried forward, echoing throughout the interior of the entire martial arts practice field. Even though his words were somewhat arrogant, there was no expert from any sect in the entire arena who was rubbed the wrong way. After all, Yi Se spoke the truth. After hearing Yi Se's words, that baby-faced purple-haired man who was in the midst of the Wilderness Sword sect stood up. Chen Feng. Beside him, a voice rang out. It came from the tall and sturdy middle-aged leader of the Wilderness Sword sect. The cultivation of this tall and sturdy middle-aged body was at the half-saint level, and he was an elder of the Wilderness Sword sect as well. This gathering of the disciples would happen once every year. It was just an ordinary occasion to exchange ideas and compare notes, so many of the sects from the northern region didn't attach a great deal of importance to it. The Wilderness Sword sect was like this as well, so ordinarily an expert of the Saint realm would not make an appearance. Be careful, and for the honor of our Wilderness Sword sect, defeat this Yi Se. The tall and sturdy middle-aged man said. Elder Li, you can rest easy. Chen Feng said confidently. Soon after he appeared atop the martial arts practice field. In merely an instant, Chen Feng and Yi Se were trading blows. The power of these two was far stronger than the rest of the geniuses in the gathering. As they fought, the activity was enormous and it attracted the gaze of everyone. Even Jian Wushuang looked over in this moment. Not bad. Jian Wushuang watched the fierce battle between the two of them. The two of them had already been fighting for some time. They had fought to a standstill, and Jian Wushuang had a definite understanding of their strength. Either of these two is much stronger than Mo Lingtian whom I killed. However, power has its limits, and even though their realization of some concepts are exceptionally high, neither of them has comprehended origin. Jian Wushuang said inwardly. Origin was far greater than any high-end concept. In the entire Nanyang continent, the amount of those who had grasped the Yin-Yang Void Realm's origin was incredibly scarce. It seemed in the ancestor's land, the first trial was to allow him to grasp the origin of the Yin-Yang Void Realm. Even though Chen Feng and Yi Se could be considered first-class geniuses in the Nanyang continent, the distance between their grasping of the origin still left them coming up short. Swordsman, my friend, what of Chen Feng's strength? Are you sure you can face him? Ling Han looked towards Jian Wushuang. I'll kill him, I'm sure. Jian Wushuang replied with indifference. He spoke the truth. At peak of the Yang Void Realm cultivation, but to still have not yet grasped origin, even if it had been a month ago it wouldn't have been hard for him to kill this Chen Feng. However, now that he had attained the level of source enlightenment, his power has increased exponentially. Killing him would be even easier. Ling Han furrowed his brow and a smile revealed itself on his face. At this moment, in the middle of the martial arts practice field, the battle had reached a fever pitch. There was the sound of a violent clash, and in the wake of it there was finally an outcome in this confrontation between the two of them. Yi Se's face was pale as he stood there, and remnants of blood were on the corners of his mouth. Ha ha, Yi Se, your strength, is that all you've got? Chen Feng stood tall and upright, as arrogant as he had seemed before in the void. He looked at Yi Se with a high and mighty air. HMPH, you got lucky. Yi Se feigned anger as he snorted coldly, then turned and walked back towards the direction of the Deluo Heaven sect. Senior brother Yi Se, Jian Yi stood up and came over, astonishment in his eyes. How could you lose to Chen Feng? Your finishing blow obviously still hasn't come to full fruition. Don't ask so many questions. Ling Han immediately chided. Jian Yi was startled, and his brow furrowed more deeply. Yi Se glanced at Ling Han, who nodded, relax. Yi Se sat down and lightly let out a breath of air. He aimed his gaze at Jian Wushuang. At this moment, Ling Han also looked towards Jian Wushuang. Swordsman, my friend, you're up. Ling Han began to speak. I'm a man of my word, and I keep my promises. Jian Wushuang stood up. Be careful. Chen Feng's power isn't so simple. Even though just then I didn't do my utmost, I could sense that if I had it still wouldn't be easy to defeat him. Yi Se warned. I'm not you. Jian Wushuang laughed insipidly, then strode towards the martial arts practice field. Chapter 270. Jian Wushuang displays his moves. Yi Se is defeated. Chen Feng is definitely the number one among the young disciples in the Wilderness Sword sect. His strength is really powerful. Before, I had been thinking that Yi Se would win. However, the result is, what a disappointment Yi Se is. I don't know what's wrong, but I have the feeling that Yi Se didn't seem to have tried his utmost. At the exchange meeting, the experts from different sects were casually talking about the fight between Yi Se and Chen Feng a while ago. But no matter how they analyzed, the fight was over, and Yi Se had lost. The disciples in the Wilderness Sword sect were all pleasantly surprised. The heavily built, middle-aged man who seemed the leader even laughed out brightly. Who else present wants to step up and take the challenge? Standing at the center of the martial arts practice field, Chen Feng looked across, with a slight sneer flashing across his eyes. The disciples who were standing around the martial arts practice field looked at each other in dismay, with their heads secretly shaking. Even Yi Se was defeated by Chen Feng. How would the disciples in these sects have the courage to fight with Chen Feng? However, at this moment, a black figure stood up from the disciples of the Deluo Heaven sect. He then slowly walked towards the center of the martial arts practice field. Suddenly, a large number of eyes moved upon the black figure from across the martial arts practice field. Everybody was staring at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang ignored their eyes, and walked to the center on the martial arts practice field. Looking at Chen Feng who was in front of him, a clear and cold voice suddenly spewed out of his mouth. I am Swordsman from the Deluo Heaven sect. Please enlighten me. The martial arts practice field was in tumult at once. Swordsman? Who is Swordsman? I have never heard of you. Deluo Heaven sect? Is there a disciple named Swordsman in the Deluo Heaven sect? The genius disciples of the old sects all looked odd. Being the two strongest sects in the whole northern region, the Wilderness Sword sect and the Deluo Heaven sect were naturally very attractive. So people knew how many disciples these two sects had and who they were. However, they had never heard that there was a genius disciple called Swordsman in the Deluo Heaven sect. Where are you from? I have never heard of you, and you want to fight with me? Get out of here, Chen Feng snarled. He then lifted his hand and slashed his sword directly towards Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang shifted his body, and warded off this sword easily. Finally the sword light landed on the martial arts practice field, and suddenly there came to a huge sword scar on the ground. The sword scar was more than a half-meter wide. Although Jian Wushuang was warding off the sword. However, at the same time while he was warding off, he was activating his spiritual power. By then, his spiritual power broke out, and then his cultivation was naturally revealed in public. Noticing the spiritual power and breath spread out from Jian Wushuang, the experts on the whole martial arts practice field were stunned. Followed by an outburst of laughter. Ha ha, is this person kidding us? What did I see? An initial Yang Void Realm? Where is the idiot from? How dare an initial Yang Void Realm challenge Chen Feng? Does the Deluo Heaven sect have no experts now? Why they send a young man who just achieved the initial Yang Void Realm to challenge? Numerous eyes around the practice field were fixed on Jian Wushuang with contempt and arrogance. The disciples from the Deluo Heaven sect who were standing aside also darkened their faces. Elder Ling Han, what's going on? A disciple from the Deluo Heaven sect asked. It was known that among the disciples from the Deluo Heaven sect who were at the meeting, the weakest one was in the exceptional Yang Void Realm level. No matter who stepped on the practice field, he might fail in defeating Chen Feng, but at least he wouldn't cause laughter from the different sects. A disciple with initial Yang Void Realm level from the Deluo Heaven sect, and he attempted to challenge Chen Feng who was at the peak of the Yang Void Realm level. If this got out, the Deluo Heaven sect would be a joke. Shut up. Just watch. Don't ask too much, Lin Han snarled, without explaining too much. Standing on the martial arts practice field, Chen Feng also noticed Jian Wushuang's cultivation of spiritual power. He was extremely stunned, but followed by his laughter. Ha ha, are the experts in the Deluo Heaven sect all thoughtless people like you? Hearing this, the genius disciples from the Deluo Heaven sect all felt shame. They even wanted to find a rock and hide themselves under. However, Jian Wushuang's face was extremely cold. No need to talk nonsense. Just display your moves and show me your full strength. Otherwise, you will have no chance, Jian Wushuang said coldly. I won't have a chance. It's you who won't have a chance. Chen Feng's face was cold. What an ignorant idiot. Since you are looking for a death, then I will help you out. No sooner had he uttered this, that Chen Feng suddenly moved his body. With a gliding move, Chen Feng appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. At the same time, he fiercely stabbed his long sword, and an overpowering wind-thunder essence realm suddenly broke out. The sword essence broke through the void, and caused a burst of crackling sounds on the void. This sword was full of monstrous power. Chen Feng had apparently activated his full strength. How come Chen Feng dealt with an initial Yang Void realm with his full power? Does he want to? He didn't spare his strength. Is he trying to kill that young man? Even if that fellow is killed, so what? He is just initial Yang Void realm, and he dares to challenge Chen Feng, which was very arrogant. It's reasonable if he gets killed by Chen Feng. And the Deluo Heaven sect can't say anything afterwards, since their disciple is overconfident. Everybody was looking at them. It's unbelievable that Chen Feng wants to kill me. Jian Wushuang sneered. Well, it saved me a lot of trouble. A second later, Jian Wushuang moved his body. Chen Feng's eyes turned cold. He almost slashed his sword out with his utmost, which was even difficult for an expert at the peak of the Yang Void realm to block. Chen Feng indeed wanted to kill Jian Wushuang. He didn't worry about the Deluo Heaven sect giving him trouble, since Jian Wushuang was too overconfident. His sword had reached near Jian Wushuang, and was about to stab into Jian Wushuang's body. However, at this moment, Jian Wushuang suddenly looked up, and gave Chen Feng a cold glance. The glance freaked Chen Feng out, and Chen Feng felt an unprecedented sense of crisis. Instantly, Jian Wushuang disappeared from Chen Feng's view. Jian Wushuang just disappeared in front of Chen Feng's eyes. What? This caught Chen Feng by surprise. He had not reacted before he noticed a strong wind blowing from the side. Chen Feng struggled to turn around, and happened to see a cold sword light gliding to him, and it glanced off his neck. Kai! There came the sound of a sword edge stabbing into the body, followed by a huge head flying off. Chen Feng remained with his eyes widened. He felt a spell of dizziness, and with his fading vision, he saw a black figure in front of him. What is that? Chen Feng subconsciously thought. But soon after, he saw it clearly that the black figure was his body. Chen Feng tried to say something. However, he could only utter a word. A second later, his head just fell on the ground. It rolled on the ground for a few circles, and then no more movements were heard. And with that final, blind strike that severed the assassin's connection to the void, we conclude chapter 270. The fusion is complete. Jian Nantian has opened his eyes, and for the first time in a decade, his spiritual energy is pure. But the battle in the garden has sent a signal through the great void. The divine sovereign has completed his recovery in the origin sea, and he has realized that to kill the sun, he must first destroy the world that birthed him. The sovereign is heading back toward the azure heaven domain. The war is going home. Join us next time for chapters 271 through 275, as Wushuang and a fully restored Nantian race back to their home world to prevent a planetary execution. Thank you for listening to Panda Audiobooks. If you're ready for the homecoming battle, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell us in the comments. Do you think the azure heaven domain can survive a god's wrath?